Standing dead. The phrase evokes suffering, pain, and an unwillingness to give up. It is the title of the book we're discussing today with award-winning author of the Timbercreek K9 series, Margaret Mizushima. Welcome to Blackbird Writers Presents Author Interviews. And welcome to you, Margaret.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to visit with you, Sharon.
Oh. Yeah, I think it's so much fun when we get to catch up.
I know.
So yeah, this book is just like impossible to put down, first of all.
Oh,
except
thank you.
I have to, because at night, otherwise I will dream about it. So it is a read until 8, then force it away and watch baking shows so I don't dream about scary things. So, great job there with that whole world building. So this is the 8th in the Timbercreek K9 series. Mm-hmm. And Timbercreek is a fictional town, I believe, in Colorado.
It is, yes. I decided I kind of wanted to play fast and loose with the geography. And even though it's based on several small towns and small mountain communities that I'm familiar with, it's completely fictional.
Right. But this one opens in hot, sweltering Mexico and then moves to San Diego. And
yes.
And Mattie, the main character, when she's not in her comfortable place, which is basically Timbercreek, she just feels so antsy, and it telegraphs off the page. And I'm just wondering, how do you come up with making her feel like that?
Well, first of all, I'm so glad that you felt it when I wrote it. I think it helps that I'm an introvert, and so I have some of those feelings when I'm not in my comfortable home place, and so I can tap into those feelings, but I don't always want to name it on the page, and so I have to drop little clues about, how she's feeling kind of a flutter in her chest, or her chest is tightening, or she's kind of dry mouthed, or, her throat feels a little bit like it's swelling. So I have to kind of drop some of those physical clues. Sometimes I just name it depending upon the book, because Mattie, followers of the series will know that she's a loner by nature. She has a history of being abused, and so she basically feels most comfortable in her own home or at the station working. And it's nothing for Mattie to lie down. I have trouble with lay and lie, which is something a lot of writers have trouble with, I've noticed. Working with my editor has really helped me become more aware of that. But Mattie will lie down on Robo's dog bed and sleep with him sometimes. So thank you for noticing that. And yes, I think it's good for Mattie to have a little bit of pressure and conflict sometimes.
Well, this book, she absolutely has quite a bit of pressure. So at least the first half, and maybe a little bit more, she has like 10 seconds of sleep. And I feel so badly for her. And when Rainbow finally sets up her little den there, I was just like, I almost cried with relief with Mattie. So sleep deprivation, that's a it's not one I see often in books as kind of a way to torture your main character. So how did you come up with this? Have you had any experiences or known anyone, or just your inspiration?
Yeah, the inspiration behind it has been from law enforcement officers that I know and who have consulted with me, and also my own husband as a veterinarian. It was nothing when he was building his practice for him to go night after night with emergencies and very little sleep. And so sleep deprivation is something I use quite often because it's so real for both of those professions. And I'm writing either in Cole Walker, the veterinarian's point of view, or Mattie's point of view. So the book will switch back and forth. And when they're on a case, because I always try to weave in something for Cole to do, as well as something for Mattie to do, they're both usually working pretty hard in their respective areas. And so sleep deprivation is something that just comes natural to those two characters. But I also like to torture Mattie with things like having to take a physical hit, or having to run across country in the Colorado mountains, or being threatened, or being afraid that her dog is threatened, and needing to watch out for her dog as well as for her. And in Standing Dead, she is threatened. And so you mentioned the little den that her friend Rainbow fixes for her at the station, because this very small mountain town jurisdiction doesn't have the officers to give her any kind of protection. And so they decide to turn one of the interview rooms at the station into a bedroom for Mattie. And Rainbow, of course, has to hang curtains. So
flowers.
Nobody can watch her through a two-way mirror. And Rainbow disables the sound so that Mattie can go in there and have a private conversation with Cole, for instance, or whoever shows up at the station. But yeah, that's how she finally gets some sleep. And I tried to make that as cozy as possible for poor Mattie, because I had really run her ragged.
You really had. I was like, oh, come on. Poor thing. which just makes Rainbow all the more wonderful.
I love Rainbow.
She's delightful.
Yeah, she is the daughter of a couple of old hippies from the 60s who settled near Timbercreek, Colorado. And it's kind of interesting because we have a lot of that going on in our mountain towns in Colorado.
Yep.
Not unusual.
So you mentioned both Cole Walker, the veterinarian, and also that your husband is a veterinarian. Now, do all vets work on large animals like horses and things like that, or is that a specialty? What things do you draw directly from your husband, other than that he worked a lot of late nights?
Typically, veterinarians sort of specialize. So they may only see small animals, they may only see cattle, they may only see horses, or they may specialize in exotics like birds and reptiles and things like that. My husband was kind of there were only a handful of veterinarians in northern Colorado who had what's called a mixed practice, where he saw both small animals. When he started out, he had a specialty in horses. So he saw small animals and horses for a period of time. And then he went ahead and did quite a bit of studying in embryo transfer of cattle. And at that point, he decided to go ahead and also do bovine medicine, although he never did really get into the dairy aspect, which there are vets that will specialize in just serving dairy cows. Oh, wow. So yeah, the mixed practice kind of carries over to Cole. Yep. And he sees primarily, because I guess because of my love of horses, he sees primarily small animals and horses. Although in book 9, I have him doing some cattle work.
Okay.
So we'll talk about that later. But yeah,
Looking forward to it.
some of those vet scenes in the series, for instance, in Striking Range, book number 7, there is a chapter where Cole delivers puppies by C-section, and the girls, his 2 daughters, help him by receiving the puppies and rubbing them with worn towels and getting them breathing and everything. And so that came right out of our lives when we had a Christmas day that we all trooped up to the clinic in the afternoon and delivered C-section puppies for a bulldog. And we had a daughter who had a boyfriend here. She was in college, and the boyfriend came to meet the parents, and he said that was the most memorable Christmas he ever had. He helped us. So yeah, so a lot of those vet scenes, I've either assisted my husband with them or our whole family was there. I didn't work for my husband in his office, but I did help him after hours and that kind of thing. So I kind of learned how to be his fetcher and carrier or assistant when he needed me.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Cole comes across as just really an expert in the field, and also when he's directing other people, he's so precise and kind simultaneously. And it's good to know that comes from your husband.
Yeah, yeah. I think that Charlie really enjoyed working with pet and horse and cattle owners during his practice, as well as working with the animals. So yeah, yeah. Charlie always said if he had a nickel for all of the people who wanted to watch him work, he would have retired a rich man. So I hoped when I started this series that there would be readers who would want to watch Cole Walker work. And so there are times that Cole Walker's at work in the books.
Yeah. No, and I love those scenes. So I want to kind of loop back to the title, which is Standing Dead, which you explain, and but it kind of has a dual meaning. Tell us about the term.
Okay, so here's the book. As you can see, there's a dead tree right there by Mattie, and it doesn't come across too well, but here's Robo. He's kind of absorbed by the background on this screen. But yeah, that standing dead term I actually heard about first for the birch forests back east that have died and are left standing. It's very dangerous because these trees, you know, eventually lose their roots, and so they might topple and fall on a person at any time. Colorado has a terrible problem with beetle kill in our forests, and so we have just acres, thousands, tens of thousands of acres of standing dead trees. And about all that can be done is that sometimes people go in there and clear that. The wood can be used for furniture. It's beautiful wood with little holes in it where the beetles have bored. But, you know, they're mostly just trees kind of standing there waiting for a forest fire. So that's what I decided to highlight in this particular book in setting, where the standing dead forests of Colorado. And of course, being a mystery writer, it only made sense that I had to have a standing dead person tied to one of those dead trees. So
yeah.
the reader will find that person early in the book because that's the first death. And of course, we mystery writers have to have a death happen pretty early in our books. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it was really like I said, it's a chilling term. It was a chilling scene when they come across it. So, yeah. Again, this is a book that you can't put down once you pick it up.
Oh.
So I do want to. You mentioned Robo there, showing the cover. Robo is the amazing K9 German Shepherd that is Mattie's partner, and he's just brilliant and wonderful, and I love him.
Me too. Me too.
So a couple of questions about Robo. One, just where did you do your K9 research?
I was so fortunate to meet a woman named Beth who had retired from Bellingham, Washington Police Force. She was a K9 trainer and handler when she had been on duty. She had a German Shepherd partner named Robo.
Okay.
And I met her prior to even deciding that I would have these characters. My first character I knew I wanted in a book was Cole Walker, the veterinarian. And so then I thought, well, it makes sense to have a canine handler, and then maybe I can have a love interest between the two. So that's kind of how that all evolved. And my mother and had a friend who was Beth's mother. They were both public health nurses who had retired, and they introduced us. And Beth was just delightful. She let me shadow her while she trained clients and dogs in AKC tracking. And then she also would sit there with me in the car after her clients left, and we would just talk about Robo. And all of the skill set that dog had was pretty amazing. So I learned a lot from her. Eventually asked her if it would be all right with her if I used Robo's name for the dog, and she was like, "Oh yes, Robo was so happy." At that point, Robo had died of old age, so I never got to meet the real Robo. So shadowing canine handlers and trainers was part of my early on research. My husband had a client who trained patrol and protection dogs. And so he would let me come and watch him train officers who had their jurisdictions had bought those dogs. And so we would sit around the picnic table, and I could ask them questions like, what kind of mistakes would a rookie canine handler make? And that kind of thing, get all their input. It was very great. Canine trials. Now, this was interesting because Robo evidently was a big winner at canine trials. But if you live in a community where they have regional canine trials, and where I saw one of these was in Las Vegas, you can go and see all kinds of dogs compete in the various skills that a patrol dog needs to have. And you can just see the wide variety of those dogs' responsiveness. And so that was just perfect. It was great. I also wanted to show you this book. This man is the man who was my husband's client. And he he wrote this book. It's not available, unfortunately, but this was my first research book. A dumb animal at the end of the leash, a trained police dog at the other. And I just think that's so clever. Yeah. And so I have that as a resource. It's got all kinds of stories of amazing things that dogs can do. I wanted my dog to be kind of a wonder dog, because the real Robo was a wonder dog. I mean, this dog could do so many things. But yeah, anyway, lots of different areas to research. I have a friend who works, her job is to go into schools and search for narcotics. And she, lets me come and watch her train her dogs. I just have so much opportunity to be able to see these dogs work. And if ever there's a demonstration, like at BoucherCon one year, the ATF brought a dog and showed us how their dog could find explosives. And, you know, I'm there if I'm anywhere where I can see a demo.
Well, it certainly comes across as Robo is indeed a wonder dog, and also that he just feels really real, not like a, you know, that dog's never going to do that. It's like, oh, that is so cool. I've seen dogs do that on, you know, TV.
Yeah. I say I try, but in the very first book, so dogs typically have a specialty. So if they're trained for patrol, they're typically trained for tracking. It's called apprehension, which means they bite and take down a fugitive. So that's apprehension, I think, is kind of a euphemism for that. But then they typically have one specialty beyond that, and it's usually narcotics in a community. Sometimes it's explosives, but they typically don't do both. And then the human remains detection dogs, typically that's their specialty, and that's what they do. Well, in the very first book, for some reason, I have Robo finding the first dead body. And I had to call my Beth, my consultant at that time, and I said, oh, this is what happened when I was writing today. What do you think? And she said, you can leave it in there. She said, a lot of times these dogs are trained. They sample the dogs and see what they're the most responsive to. And okay. So, you know, maybe that's what happened with the young Robo, is they did a little bit of cadaver dog training, and he remembers it. So,
so he really is a wonder dog.
Yes, I left it. But in later books, I went ahead and brought in the cadaver dogs to actually look for graves.
So what is next for Mattie and Robo? I heard you mention a book 9 that
there is a book 9 in the works. Yeah, I'm so excited. So my husband and I moved from Colorado to the Pacific Northwest. And in doing so, I became very inspired by these very different forests out here. And the wilderness area is so different from Colorado. And I thought, okay, I think Mattie needs to be called to the Pacific Northwest. And so Mattie will be called out on a search and rescue mission because of needing more air scenting dogs. And Robo's trainer, Jim Madsen, who is kind of based on Joe, he has been called because he's kind of on a regional team that can get called. And so he calls Mattie in chapter 1 and explains that he needs her to come join him. And so it's 1 week before Mattie and Cole are supposed to get married. So Mattie takes the call, and we'll see how Cole responds to that. Yeah. He may not be as kind and understanding as he usually is.
Yeah, you know, you got to keep pushing him, see what he does. All right. So where can our friends and fans find you? You have margaretmizushima.com.
That's right. And that's spelled MargaretMizushima.com. And I'm also on Facebook at author Margaret Mizushima. I have a private page that I've kind of made public, so you can find me on both of those pages. And then I'm on Instagram at MargMizu, MargMizu. And I'm also on Twitter at MargMizu. So
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to visit with us today. And thank all of you at home for watching.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.